Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Fearless and Free TV. Today I'm going to be speaking with Maureen St. Germain. Maureen is an internationally known ascension teacher. She's a best-selling author, an award-winning author. She has an amazing gift for communicating with Source, and she's going to be telling us about 5D and also about how to connect with your higher self in an easy and practical way. And a lot of you have asked me that question, how do I connect to my higher self? So she's going to be teaching how to do that. So you definitely want to watch this conversation that I'm having with her. Before I bring Maureen on, I want to let all of you know, if you go to my website to pick up my free book, Rise Up, it's all about the Great Awakening and the ascension that's happening right now. Just to let you know, I've discovered there's a little bit of an issue with my download. So when you go to my website and you get your free book, it also asks you to put in your information to participate in my inspirational newsletter as well. Something is broken in that process. So when you do go to my website to order the book and get on my email list, if for some reason you get an error message, please send me an email to let me know you've got this error message. Apparently only some people receive the error message, which I find really interesting. If you get the error message, send me an email, please. I will email you a copy of the book, and I will also manually input you into the email list so that you don't miss any of the insights and the inspirations and the updates that I put on this weekly or so newsletter. I call it or so because I try to do it every Friday. Every once in a while, Friday gets missed. I'm really trying to hone in on my energy though and making sure that it goes out every Friday. So yeah, check that out. Also on my website, check out the classes I have available. I have my upcoming Transcendence Process class. That is for those of you that are trying to figure out how to make peace with your past and resolve some personal issues. It's a class I teach in person and live, and it's a small group environment. So we have this amazing synergy with just a few other people who almost always end up being friends by the end. So check that out. And now, before I do, don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe, because that's how these messages get forwarded all across the world and into the hearts of the people that need to hear them. This is part of how we are service to humanity, by sharing these forward. Okay, now I will bring in Maureen St. Germain and have what I know is an amazing conversation about what's possible for humanity. Well, Maureen, it is so nice to see you and nice to meet you in person. I mentioned off camera that I chased you around all weekend at the Conscious Life Expo. I didn't really chase you around because I knew where you were, where your workshops were, which floor they were on, and where your booth was, but we never quite connected. So it's really nice to finally meet you here and to hear this message that I know wants to speak through you. You talked all weekend about 5D, and a lot of humanity is starting to really understand what 5D is. I've been calling it for years. I've been calling it a love-based reality. And what's great is that we've actually been able to create more of a concrete concept around it so that people are better at being able to visualize what that looks like. Religion.
I like to tell people that when they say, well, what is 5D? I just say, well, it's what everyone else calls heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's what religions have called heaven on earth. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're creating. Mm-hmm. So share with my audience, as I mentioned to you, a lot of my audience are spiritual newbies, and they are soaking all of this stuff up. There are a lot of people have had spiritual awakenings in the last 2 years, and they're looking for spiritual guidance.
So what I teach and write about is all the transformational ideas that are so different from what we have been taught by our traditions. So I teach about the fact that there's no more karma. And if we're in 5D, we're no longer keeping score on ourselves or anyone else. Mm. So it's obvious then that there is no karma. When I was first told that there was no more karma, even though I'd been teaching about 5D, it was a tough one to kind of wrap my brain around it. And, I spent a long time meditating on it and trying to make sense out of it, because if there's no more karma, what about this and what about that? And the answer, believe it or not, is it's all a game. And as one of the masters who channeled through me, Sanat Kumara, said, the game is over. The game will end when there is no more players. Will you be the first to leave or the last?
Mm.
And that pretty much nails it, because it isn't about, well, what if they do this or what if they do that? It's that's a game that we're not playing anymore, and we can choose not to play it. And when we choose not to play it, we can step out of it, and then all that stuff goes on, perhaps beneath us, but we don't have to participate. And the cool thing is, as we evolve, one of the things that I've observed is we evolve in a sine wave. So we have some highs, so we get it, we hold our vibration high, and then someone pushes our button, we go down low, and then we go high again. But the whole trajectory is still at an angle, and we're still making progress, even though we're going up and down and up and down. And initially, people used to think that once you become 5D, that's it. It's like getting your driver's license, you're in. But that's not true. It's more like borrowing someone's car. You have to ask each time. So the idea is, fifth dimension is a vibrational data set. And there's now a new game in town called the magnanimous dimension. And what that has done is merged third, fourth, and fifth, so that you can slide easily between them and commingle with them and allow for yourself at 5D to interact with the 3D vibe, and then, pull back a little bit and go back in. And the idea being, as we evolve, we're going to have situations and circumstances where people will drop into their polarity consciousness, and we don't have to follow them in there. We can stay where we're at. And then when they're ready and we're ready, we can commingle again.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, because I've been calling for years. I've been calling that doing the splits, spiritual splits, because I've had one leg in 5D and one leg in 3D, and it's really uncomfortable to try to straddle both of them at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I call it I've been told by the guides, magnanimous dimension. And I put it on my website, and it's right on top. And it basically explains that, there was a belief system by a lot of people that, once you became fifth dimensional, you were fifth dimensional. And in reality, it's a lot harder to let go of the 3D world than we think it is,
mm-hmm.
or than we're maybe labeling. And so it serves us to have this fluidity that allows us to move back and forth. One of the things I've been teaching about recently is the 3 earths. There's a crash and burn earth, there's a do-over earth, and then there's the ascending earth. And the do-over earth is full of well-intentioned people that maybe just haven't quite understood or gotten into the understanding of what's really happening and how we're transforming. And then the other, the ascending earth, is everybody who's on a trajectory, and that trajectory includes devotion to a spiritual practice, whatever it is. Not necessarily devotion to a spiritual master, but to your inner guru and the devotional aspect of that. And then clear intention to be connected to nature and to people. And those things allow us to continue to evolve, because frankly, the world around us is changing so rapidly that the only way we can really know what's going on is if we're meditating and if we're spending time outside.
Absolutely. Which for me is a form of meditation. I'll go out and I stick my feet in the grass and stay grounded. Yeah.
Yeah. Very important. Very, very important. So we spiritually grow by understanding that we don't know, and by being in a place of wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Just being in a place of wonder. So instead, when something happens you don't get, you don't understand, you don't like it, whatever it is, to say, I wonder what's going on. I wonder how that will work out. I wonder what they really meant.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what that really reminds me of is really holding ourselves in this state of childlike wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And how many people really do that? They just go along through life following the rules and doing what people tell them to do. But instead of being in this continual state of, when you think about children, they're always asking, why? Why is that? What is that? How does that work?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe allow ourselves to return back into that state of wonder, rather than being in it's. And I've noticed what a lot of people do is that then when they start to see what's happening in the world, they go into a state of judgment rather than maintaining that state of wonder.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because it's a new way to think, to be in a place of wonder, then perhaps get data, we'll call it data rather than information, and then allowing that data to be compartmentalized, but to not have the compartments be polarized.
Right.
Yeah. So that's not how we've been thinking for a long, for eons. So it's literally becoming fifth dimensional. Becoming fifth dimensional is actually doing that, being in a place. And one of the things I like to tell people is, it doesn't mean that you don't have judgment about what you want. What it means is you have the ability to discern what your preferences are, what pleases you. And then everything else for everyone else is fine.
Right.
And that's especially tricky if you're a parent, to create a space for your children. I took the tack that once they hit age 12 or 13, that I pretty much had taught them everything they were going to learn. And from that point on, I began asking them, how are you going to solve that? What are you going to do to fix that? Rather than, when I was your age, I did X.
I love that. I haven't been doing that nearly enough with my kids. So,
Yeah.
Although I have learned how to let go of my attachments to who I think who I would like them to be and what I would like them to know. I've learned how to let go of those.
Yeah. I can
attachments.
remember when my youngest son called me and said he wasn't going to go to graduate school. And I really wanted him to go to graduate school because he was a little bit on the immature side, and I felt it would really round him out. And I also thought it would give him some additional tools that he needed. And I remember saying, well, I'm sure you're making the right decision, honey. And as soon as I got off the phone, I screamed. Yeah. I was pretty upset, but I never let on,
Yeah. But then afterwards, you sat down and you realized that these were your own issues, right? Your own attachments.
I never gave it another thought. I just let my emotion go with the scream. And then that was it. No judgment or thought about it one way or the other. Yeah. I mean, I obviously I screamed because I did have attitude and expectation and desires for him. And I could see what he needed, and, he turned out just fine. He went through a lot of struggles to get where he is today, but he's fine. He's totally fine and he's happy and everything's good. So who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? So yeah, it's been interesting.
And that is interesting, just to allow other people's paths to unfold the way that they see is best for them. Yeah. And you brought up something really important for people to grasp. And I think that is the difference between judgment and discernment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it's okay to have a bias. And, every once in a while I'll say to someone, well, my personality wants this, but I've checked in with my guidance and it says this. So we're going with guidance.
Right.
And I'm perfectly fine with that. But I also enjoy the experience of being in a body and having a personality and desires and preferences. And, I had I've had so many amazing experiences when I would announce, I do not want to do this. This is a terrible idea. Blah, 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 get on a rant and, just go. And then at the end, I would say, but I'll check in. And if my guidance tells me to do it, I will. And I've had so many amazing experiences that were counterintuitive. everything in front of us would say, do this. And yet guidance was, no, do it this way. And I have always been amazed at how well these things turn out. And that's one of the things I teach is the higher self connection. And there are very few people that will say you can get 100% accuracy. But I have a 3-step protocol that I teach people. And it is so effective that you don't have to trust it. And what's the difference between trusting and knowing? We trust that we'll meet, and we know the sun will come up. So it changes you because, and a lot of people say to me, well, I have a good connection. I don't need that. And my response is, do you follow your guidance 100%? And if the answer is no, then you don't have 100% accuracy because you still let your ego or your personality or other people's egos and personalities influence your decision.
Right.
So
well, it's really hard. It's really difficult for a lot of people to get past that because it's a completely different way of making decisions in our lives. And a lot of people are not taught from childhood to trust themselves. They're taught to trust someone outside of themselves, and then the ego is constantly talking at us.
I think we all make decisions based on history. My history, my friend's history, the internet history, whatever we can get that gives us information about when this happens, do this. And I tell people, just do all those things. Do all the steps. You're going to buy a car, look at the prices, look at what other people are saying about that car, look on the review boards and see what they're saying about the car, and then ask your higher self at the end, the last thing you do. And the protocol is pretty simple. I can share it with you if you want. It is something that's trademarked, but I still share it with people, if you want me to share it.
Sure. And then if people want to dive more into that, then they can go to your website and get more information on that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So for 45 days, you do the following. You ask only yes, no questions. You give yourself a little meditation where you ask your higher self to give you a symbol or a signal for yes, no, and neutral. So you're not doing anything but just asking higher self, give me my signal or symbol for neutral, for no and yes and neutral. So it might be an itchy ear. It might be pressure on the chest. You might get a visual, a triangle or a color or a shape, but everybody gets something. And there's a small percentage, maybe 10% of the population that don't get anything. And I do have a workaround for that. But for most people, if you ask in meditation, just a quiet meditation, show me my signal for yes, you'll get something. And one lady got an itchy ear for yes, and she didn't like that. So she's telling her body, settle down. We're gonna get the signal. And then her toes started to itch. Settle down. We're gonna get the signal. And then her whole body started to itch. So then she said, all right, I'll take the itchy ear. So sometimes we overlook it or we bypass it or we don't like it or it's not good enough, that kind of stuff. So you first, just establish your signal or symbol. And some people actually get the word yes. They hear the word yes, which is fantastic. But it's not required. You don't have to hear the word yes. You can have any kind of a signal that shows up. And then you ask only yes, no questions, 30 or 40 times a day about stuff you don't care about. So, the dessert menu, is it my highest best good to have dessert? Well, if you already got your face fixed for dessert, don't ask, just enjoy. But if you're already decided you're going to have a dessert, you might ask your higher self, this one or this one. And the way you ask is, higher self, is it my highest best good to do this? Higher self, is my highest best good to do this? And so over time, when you start asking about stuff you don't care about, what happens is you get that rapport going. You get a history going. You get familiarity. You and your higher self have got a thing going. And then always follow through. That's rule number 2. Always follow through. So if you ask your higher self, is it my highest best good to take this route home? And your higher self said yes, then don't be changing your mind midstream. Just do what your higher self tells you. And then the third thing is set aside all your other divination toys. So no pendulum, no muscle testing, no kinesiology. Set all that aside and just practice this. And the reason is the same as the reason you don't learn French and German at the same time. It's too tempting to mix it up, or to accidentally test it, or to start, double checking or something like that. So it's only 3 things. Only yes, no questions for 45 days, follow through, and set aside your other divination tools. So what happens is you get a lot of experiences that don't seem to mean anything. But in hindsight, it's like, oh, I showed up at that restaurant that my higher self said to go to, and I ran into this friend I was looking for. Or you are with a bunch of friends and you check in, ask your higher self on the menu. This, you go through the menu, figuring out, well, this looks good, higher self, which one? And you end up with the best meal at the table. Stuff like that will happen. And it's the hindsight. You're not keeping score. You're simply aware that that really worked out. That really worked out. And so your personality, your ego starts to get it, that your higher self is always right. And when you start to make that connection, that's when you are at the place of willingness to follow your higher self. So then after 45 days, we get new DNA, we get new cells. And so what happens is you've transformed yourself enough after 45 days of practice, the sensation or your signal, and then your higher self can come in and give you other information. And you can say, is this my higher self telling me X, Y, Z? And so it's a really powerful, powerful tool. And then of course, the obvious happens. You ask your higher self something and decide, I'm doing it anyway, and that's okay after your practice period, after your 45 days. So, I like to joke around that you'll only do that once because it's, you'll see very clearly, man, I should have listened. And so then you realize, okay, my higher self is always right. It's really fun and it's really powerful. I was booked into New York City. I'd asked my higher self what days to do my workshop. I was given the dates, and back in the day, before COVID, and I would be booking space. I'd be booking it 6 months in advance in New York because otherwise space would be too difficult to get. And in August, when I went to buy my airline tickets for a September event, my higher self said, do not fly home on September 11th, 2001. I did not know why. I only knew I couldn't fly home. So I asked, what am I to do? And I was told, fly home immediately after your event. So I was on the first flight out Monday morning. And when I had to cancel some of the appointments that I made on Monday, I was asked, well, why are you canceling? I thought we were going to, do this. And my response was the same. I don't know. I checked in and I need to be home. Maybe one of my kids will need me. Maybe something, get an important phone call, We all knew why I wasn't in New York City on September 11th.
Yeah. Wow. Now I've had some opposite experiences where my higher self has told me to do things and I didn't do them.
So you belong to the category, what not to do.
Exactly. It's funny. So the years ago, people would say, well, can you give me advice about what to do? And I would say, I can tell you exactly what not to do. So even going back to the menu at the restaurant, right, where I'm toying between two and I get a very clear message to eat this and then I end up getting the other thing and then later I have heartburn. It's that kind of thing. Oh, yeah, I really should have listened. And it's even been bigger than that. For me, there was an entire business concept I created and didn't listen to my inner voice that said, don't start that business because it's not going to be the best investment of your money. And, it ended up being okay because it actually was the catalyst for my spiritual awakening after 2008 because the economy crashed and I lost that business. But if I would have listened to my higher self to begin with, I wouldn't have even gotten into that business. So, I don't know.
You can be the other side of it. We'll be the poster children.
Well, now I do. Now I'm always, every time I finish anything, I'm always asking myself, what's next? What's next? Now, I have really clear communication. So I get the actual words of what to do. And sometimes it's really surprising, one, it might be go for a walk on the beach. Well, that was nowhere on my to-do list, but okay.
Yeah.
And it's trusting that. And usually when I do, I meet someone at the beach that I wasn't expecting to meet, or something cool always comes from listening to what my higher self says to do rather than looking at the to-do list.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very, very cool. I have an amazing experience where I was flying home from a teaching gig in China, and I was tired. It'd been 3 weeks of teaching, and my husband said, well, we're going to be going to Los Angeles from San Diego we lived in San Diego at the time, to LACMA to listen to a concert. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends was performing there. And we were members of the LACMA, so, the Los Angeles Art Museum. And so we liked going there. So it was a lovely opportunity to be there. And my husband came up with this brilliant idea to go to the Broad Museum because it had just opened. And he said, we'll have time to do both, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm going to be flying for 13 hours. I don't want to do that. That's a terrible idea. That means we have to get up early, eat breakfast in the car, drive for, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And when I got through with my tirade, I said, but I'll check in. If my higher self said yes, I'll do it. So my higher self said yes. And standing in line, I met this woman who had tickets for early entry. And she initially didn't want to give them to me until she realized there was two of us. My husband had gone running off for coffee. And then while I was following her back to her place in her line, my guides came in and said, you need to talk to her. So I did. And she handed me her ticket at one point and said, I'm going up front to ask about something. You're going to need this in case we get separated. So just hang on to it. And I looked at it, and it was a very long German name. And I said the name out loud, and I said, I used to know a family by that name, but they're from Ohio. And the man looked at me and said, well, we're from Ohio. And without skipping a beat, the older woman, his mom, who was with them, looked at me and said, are you Maureen? Mm. And it turns out that Pat, the older woman, was my mother's closest friend when I was a teenager.
Oh my gosh.
And so we chatted in line, had a really good visit. And then we would run into each other, throughout the museum. And at one point, Pat said to me, Maureen, when do you think I last saw you? And I said, at my first wedding 40 years ago.
Wow.
And my joke is, well, I guess I haven't changed. But this great story doesn't end there. A few months, while we were sitting in line, I said, if you ever get to New York, we have an apartment that we don't use that much. It's fully furnished. You're welcome to stay there. And he said, actually, that would be good for us because we have two daughters that are going to school in New York City. Well, that sounded good. These are people that we knew. So I said, fine, just let us know when you need it. Then one day I needed a new assistant. So I called Mike and I said, do you think either of your daughters would like to come to work for me part-time? One of them did and turned out to be one of the best employees I ever had. And when she left after 2 years, she sent her close friend who was equally clever, smart, able to handle the workload, and just a joy to be around. I wouldn't have had any of that if I had said, I'm not going early. It's too much of an imposition.
Wow.
And I sent a picture of me and Pat to my mom. She was blown away. How could you manage that, Maureen? It's very cool stuff. So, and what you said about it being counterintuitive, your inner guidance can often be counterintuitive. It doesn't make any sense to get up extra early the day after a big flight home, But when you have the connection and the history of accuracy, there's no reason not to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all
have with good fortune.
Yeah. And every one of us have that ability within us. We all have that inside us. We just have to learn how to set the egoic mind aside and listen.
Well, that's why the practice period is so powerful, because when you practice on unimportant stuff for 45 days, you don't have to look at your ego, because you don't have an ego in that. You know, if you really don't care what you fix for dinner and you get told to cook the whole chicken, even though that means the fish is going to be a day old, but you do that, and then somebody shows up and you say, why don't you stay for dinner? There's plenty of food. You know, things like that will happen that don't seem to make sense in the moment. But your higher self knows everything you care about and everything that's going on around you. Mm-hmm. And so it's more than just you. You know, the higher self is the part of you that's fully plugged into source. So it's got the lateral view, and it's got the, you know, the personality view, what you like, what your preferences are, what your needs are. So it's really amazing.
That is amazing. And you know what that really does, that trial period, it really gets you to self-trust.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, it's funny because the word trust still implies doubt. I trust you will show up. I trust you will pay me back. I trust that you will, you know, take care of this job I gave you. When you know, knowing is like, there is absolutely no question that it's going to happen.
Got it.
And that's why I call it, you don't have to trust your higher self anymore. You'll know.
Right.
Higher self. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Thank you for pointing that out, because there's hope, faith, trust, and then above that is absolute knowing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And not a lot of people ever get to that space of absolute knowing, but I know what you're talking about. So when I was 21 years old, I went to this car lot to get a new car, and I walked in and I was checking out the cars. I had an old beat up clunker that I needed to get rid of. And I walked out of the car lot absolutely knowing I was going to come back the next day for that car. Made no sense whatsoever. I was brand new. I'd been in San Diego for a week. I didn't have a job. I was sleeping on someone's couch, but I knew for a fact I was going to get that car.
That's excellent.
I got my new car. Then the guy said, well, we don't understand how you got approved for this. I just did.
That's excellent. Well, and there is something to doing the best you can. And we all have moments where we know we could have done better. But there's also a quality about most of your listeners, I'm sure, that they're doing the best they can, and they're really trying to live a good life, a harmonious life, a life that's not only filled with joy, but filled with some level of service towards their fellow man, towards their family, like that. And so that willingness to be part of the bigger system that we all belong to makes it easy for those magical moments like yours to happen.
Right.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very, very
I know
cool.
I know you have to leave a little bit earlier today than usual. For everyone who is watching, I know my shows are normally an hour long, but Maureen's got other places to be and other people to talk with. So she's going to be on her way. Thank you so much, Maureen, for being here and for sharing your wisdom and that beautiful light that you are.
Thank you. And thank you for having me and accommodating me. It's been great. We'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And for all of you who are watching, thank you for being here and for being the lights that you are. As I always say, remember to hold your light so high others can't help but see their own light. Together, we are creating a world of peace, harmony, prosperity, and freedom for all life on earth. And as always, get bold, be fearless, and live free.